Welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us for today's webinar. Our topic is low-code revolution, drive faster enterprise transformation. I think it's going to be a great webinar. Before we jump into it, I want to let everybody know we'll be chatting on Twitter at #AppianChat. And we've got some great speakers here today. First and foremost, we've got Neil Ward-Dutton. He's an industry analyst and principal at MWD Advisors. He's a co-founder of MWD with over 20 years of experience as an IT industry analyst. He advises IT organizations and vendors worldwide on topics like digital transformation, IT strategy and architecture, and BPM, business process management. We also have Bill Raczyk. Bill is the Director of Business Process Improvement at the OCC, which is the Options Clearing Corporation, the world's largest equity derivatives clearing organization. And over there, Bill's responsible for the strategic direction of OCC's Appian platform, and he helps drive organizational improvement across the organization through analysis, process innovation, and technology deployment support. I myself am Kevin Spurway. I'm SVP of Marketing here at Appian. I want to thank both Neil and Bill for joining us here today, and thank all of you in the audience as well. So with that, let's just jump right in. A recent survey of Global 2000 executives showed 87% reporting that they had a digital transformation project in the works for 2017, and 47% of those surveyed reported that digital transformation was in fact their #1 corporate priority. So there is a really significant energy and major investment happening, probably as we all know, behind digital transformation right now. Effectively, companies really have to transform in order to be competitive in today's market. At a basic level, digital transformation is powered by software. Of course, companies have always used software, but what's really changed is that software has evolved into a weapon for companies to differentiate themselves, to adapt faster than their competition, and to build engaging customer experiences. So to excel in this new world, every company really needs to become a software company. But becoming a software company is not always the easiest thing to do, and it has its challenges. And first and foremost of those challenges, you've got agility. Is your organization really agile enough to move quickly to attack new software projects? How well are business and IT working together? Does IT have the tools, the methodology, and the experience for agile development? And is business tied into that new paradigm of fast, rapid iterative software development? Second of all, silos. Same old story around silos. You're effectively at the mercy of existing enterprise applications. You can't get data out of them very easily. They aren't talking to each other. They're very, very difficult and expensive to change. So that makes evolving business processes and building new business processes very, very difficult. Scarce developer resources. Talented developers are increasingly hard to hire and extremely hard to retain. A recent analyst survey found 83% of respondents, CIO respondents, agree that there's a shortage of software development professionals out there. So, it kind of makes sense. When every big company like GM, which you see here in the article, is hiring hundreds of thousands of developers, you get an imbalance between supply and demand, and that drives up the price of development talent. And then finally, you have the old 80-20 rule. So this has been kind of a truth of enterprise IT for a long time. On average, organizations spend about 80% of their budget maintaining existing systems, which leaves effectively about 20% for new projects and innovation. Just about every organization has these challenges, and that's really where a low-code platform can come in and be a game changer. But not every low-code platform is created equally when it comes to building enterprise-grade software. So to expand on this, I'm going to turn it over to Neil Ward-Dutton, and I think Neil's going to kick things off with a little bit of a survey question. Neil?
Thanks so much, Kevin. I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you here today. And yeah, I'm going to start things off with a cheeky poll, because we've got a really good audience here, and I want to figure out what you're actually doing right now. So the poll question I've put in here is, what is the primary area of focus for your organization in its digital transformation efforts? So, often organizations are doing many things, but what's the primary area of focus? As you can see here, is it really primarily about improving the efficiency of your operations? Are you mainly in your org trying to create new products and services that are digitally powered? Is it all about CX, customer experience? Or is it all about the workplace and employee engagement, maybe particularly for mobile or field workers? What is it that's really driving what you're doing? So I'll leave that up for a few moments and get your takes on that. The reason that, while we're just waiting for results to come in, the reason why I asked this question is over the last 2 years, me and my team have been doing a lot of research with organizations trying to figure out exactly what's going on. And we do see an awful lot of variety in what's really driving digital transformation. And certainly when you ask 10 companies, you'll probably get 10 different answers about what the focus really is. And that makes it complicated. But as I'm about to explain, there are some really important kind of invariants that sit beneath these priorities. So, regardless of the priority, there are some really important kind of underlying things that we'll dig into. Okay, let's see what we got from the poll here. All right. So this is pretty interesting. Around half of you guys who responded said you're really primarily focusing on the operational efficiency in your org. And then second up, just under a quarter, it's all about CX. And then actually around a fifth, creating new products and services, and the remainder really focusing on improving the workplace. Now that is interesting because more widely, we see that organizations are primarily focused on driving customer experience, but operational efficiency comes up in second place in a kind of wider census of organizations. So that's very, very interesting. But as I said, regardless of where you're starting or where your primary focus is, there are some really important things to realize about this. And in fact, Kevin already touched on a couple of the points very well. So let me skip over my little opening chart here and get to the meat, which is really, as I said, it's like the kind of invariant piece underneath all those priorities. So yes, we see many organizations pursuing digital transformation to drive better customer experience. But we also see many focusing on operational efficiency, and we see many focusing on products and services and so on. Those are all different perspectives, but no, it's not the question that one person's right and another person's wrong. In all those cases, the underlying truth is that digital technologies enable you to coordinate resources more effectively. Now, depending on your focus and your interest, those resources might be more around people and what's in their heads and what they want to do, or those assets and resources might be more around kind of tangible things like materials, like assets, like vehicles, like infrastructure. So there are different ways of looking at this, but the fundamental piece is how digital technologies enable you to coordinate resources and assets more effectively. And the other piece that's really important is that fundamentally this is not about a destination. You don't transform to digital, and digital being about, okay, yeah, we're using the cloud, or we're using mobile, or we're using big data analytics. It's not a one and done thing. Fundamentally, what we're seeing from the most mature organizations and those organizations that are kind of digital native is that fundamentally they see that this transformation is about enabling a new way to change. Okay, so it's really about, it's not about going to somewhere, it's about changing the way that you change in your organization. And Kevin talks about becoming a software company. And I think that's a really nice way to look at it. Fundamentally, what we see in the most mature orgs is that they realize that the power of this transformation is about creating platforms and practices that enable much more agile working, much more use of data, and a virtuous cycle. So on the right-hand side here, which is really a little cartoon about what this journey looks like, it's about realization that digital platforms give you an instrumented view, an instrumented kind of underpinning of how your products are performing, how your services are performing, how your processes are performing. And they also allow you to drive agility based on that data. So it's not all about the highest paid person in the room, the hippo, and their their idea about what's going to drive your business forward. It's about real understanding of what works, what doesn't work, what customers like, what they don't like, what they want, what they don't want. And it's about that kind of virtuous cycle of platform and insight. Now, that's all very well, right? But in fact, as Kevin also just alluded to, it's not always that simple. It is certainly the case, and we've seen this over the last 18 months, that there's a big shift in mindset in the CTO community, in the CIO community, across how those people are trying to drive the agenda forward. You know, when we did some of this research around 8 years ago, we asked people to kind of share with us their stories of how they're trying to drive innovation, how they're trying to drive improvement. They would really be modeling themselves on the big kind of enterprise tech giants. You know, they would be talking about SAP, they'd be talking about Microsoft, IBM, Oracle, those guys. And when we looked at who it was who was really driving the agenda fastest, it was typically financial services and it was telcos. And now when we've been doing this research over the last 18 months, it's a very different picture. Actually, we find that the people really pushing the agenda hard are modeling themselves on organizations like Netflix, like Amazon, like Google, organizations that are really kind of nailing this idea of change as being part of business as usual. We don't have business as usual and then change being something separate. Those two things are completely integrated. And this idea that change is just part of the way we run our business and really embracing that. And we also see that the organizations pushing the agenda furthest, fastest aren't necessarily financial services and telcos. Yes, those guys are in the mix, but it's also retail, it's utilities, it's government and public sector, it's travel and transport, it's consumer packaged goods and pharmaceuticals and utilities, and all kinds of places we didn't see things happening before. As we already know, and I'm sure you guys feel this every day, and Kevin also alluded to this a moment ago, it's not an easy situation that most people find themselves in. So we recently carried out a survey. It was May time. We asked a whole bunch of CIOs to give us the kind of we were taking their pulse, understanding what it was they were trying to do, the relationships they had with different parts of the business, where the key items on their agenda were. And one thing we found that came out very strongly was that there's, around 4/5 of them expect to be taking more active roles in digital transformation and innovation initiatives over the coming 24 months. And that's fantastic, right? Because for sure, it's not a sustainable position for digital to be driven just by the marketing team. That's a fair place to start sometimes, but it can't only be about that. So that's a really positive finding. But at the same time, though, we found out that 69% also said that they are struggling to keep up with demand for new technology capabilities. And if you want to find out more about that survey, there's a link there at the bottom of this free download you can get access to if you want to. So what we're really seeing through the research we're doing is that IT teams are, that they have this task, this item on their agenda, which is to try and get more involved in driving digital innovation. They're also trying to meet existing demands today, which are being driven by increasing adoption of SaaS offerings, by increasing demand for mobile front ends, and for indeed just supporting new mobile channels and enabling field service workers more effectively. And of course, there's this 80-20 thing. It's not always exactly 80-20, of course, but huge gobs of money being swallowed up by just business as usual, keeping the lights on. So, this is not a happy situation, but it's also where this idea of low-code application platforms fit in. Let's talk a little bit about, at a high level, what those things really are and what they do. With apologies to people who are really technical, I've tried to keep this pretty high level and really focus more on the business value piece. Fundamentally, low-code platforms employ 3 different strategies to enable you to move fast. They employ visual design tools. So when you build an app, you are dragging things typically around on a canvas. You're specifying behavior by visually linking things together, by working at a conceptual level. So that's number one. Also backed by this idea of model-driven development. And then really that's all about enabling people to specify application behavior through configuration rather than by detailed coding. And then that is backed off by code generation or interpretation. So we're using visual design tools to create these abstract models, and then the models are interpreted or compiled to actually drive a running application. So, you know, actually, for any one of you who's been around in the industry for, you know, certainly, you know, like 15, 20 years, at a high level, this concept is not new. You know, back in the 1990s, we talked about 4GLs, fourth generation languages, and we talked about RAD tools, and we talked about, you know, model-driven RAD tools. And at a very, very high level, we're really talking about the same ideas, but really recast for the digital era. Let's have another look at one level deeper at what you really get with a modern low-code tool. Well, you know what? We talked about model-driven development and design. So what does that model look like? Well, in many tools, there are fundamentally 3 layers. And again, any one of you with a kind of architecture background will be very familiar with those 3 core layers, right? There's UX at the top, there's the user interface piece. In the middle, there's a business logic layer where we're defining the kind of functional behaviors that are core to how the application operates. And then underneath, we're defining a data management layer. So how the application essentially persists data, how it protects data, and how it ensures that referential integrity happens, and all that good stuff. Some platforms go further, and they provide an extra layer, which is around workflow. So fundamentally, layers of specification that are about how do we coordinate the work that gets done by people and by systems? How do we enable that coordination to happen in an instrumented way so that we can understand what's working and what's not working? And then also right at the back, they provide integration technologies, integration layers that again are model driven. So we're not having to code the integration by hand, but we're able to assemble and configure integration services. So the more sophisticated tools out there, and Appian is definitely part of this category, they don't just focus on UX and business logic and data management. There's obviously, given Appian's heritage, a very strong workflow story and an integration story as well. It's not just about those 3 basic layers. All right. So with that in mind, you know, let me just recap quickly. So low-code platforms, they drive speed because you're not having to code in detail. They allow collaboration because you're actually using visualizations of what you want to happen. So you don't have to have technical people just working in isolation to fulfill some kind of spec. You can actually work in front of and with your, in quotes, customer, whether that is a real end customer or whether it's someone internal. You can have blended teams, co-located, working together, regardless almost of how detailed those people's skills are in terms of technology. So you can have business analysts, you can have subject matter experts, you can have technical people all collaborating around the result. And that's a huge win, right? If you want to move fast, you need that collaboration. And lastly, you get that agility because you're developing models, if you need to change, you can understand where you need to change and you can change with confidence. Okay, so fundamentally speed, collaboration, agility. And they're all, goes without saying really, super, super important if you want to drive a new kind of relationship between business and technology and get further towards having kind of software as part of the DNA of how your company works. So with all that in mind, how do you choose? Now, if any of you guys have looked out and done a bit of a market survey and looked at what's on offer, you, depending on how long you took to do that little survey, you might have found kind of 5 to 10 tools. But, you know, actually, if you dig a little, you'll find 20, 30, 40, 50. There's so many tools out there. How do you choose? Well, we really advocate choosing by breaking the problem down. And it's very easy to kind of think of digital transformation as being one thing, but actually what we're finding is that there's 3 core use cases where it's profitable and useful to use these kinds of tools. And so for me, the really key part of your process has to be about, okay, which of these use cases are important to us and how are we going to fulfill those use cases with tools? So let me lay this out for you. As I said, 3 distinct but related, actually, types of use cases for these modern low-code platforms in relation to transformation initiatives, right? So let's look at these 3 use cases, and we'll go through them one by one. The first one is application prototyping. Now, if any of you are familiar with lean startup ideas, you're familiar with the kinds of techniques that are used by many kind of web agencies, digital agencies, specialists in this area. They really make prototyping a central capability of what they do. It's all about working right in front of the customer or the user. So prototyping is really about creating something that may end up being thrown away, actually. But what you're doing is you're kind of working out loud. You're working transparently in front of the user. So low-code application platforms can really help developers here, working out loud in front of stakeholders, building and demonstrating features visually and quickly, right? So key here is that to serve this use case, platforms don't have to be super sophisticated, actually, but they do have to be quick. You have to be able to move really, really fast. That's the application prototyping piece. The second use case is slightly different. And although it may seem sometimes like you're doing the same thing, it's really important to realize that this is a different kind of use case with a different need. So this is really about the creation of standalone departmental applications. So where we are finding that to drive further improvement, to really support maybe a new promise to the customer, we need to enable teams within our organization to work together much more effectively, much more quickly, and not drop the ball, and have a consistent view of information, and have a mobile app that allows them to be in front of the customer, all that good stuff. At the scale of a standalone department. So that might be, for example, a use case that is around complaints management, or it might be around, it might be specifically around onboarding for new clients, or it might be around problem resolution. So, really something that has departmental scope. And that's the second use case. And low-code platforms here can help relatively non-technical people build relatively straightforward apps quickly. So they have a slightly different kind of value here. They don't have to offer integration capabilities here. You think back to the model I just showed you, that 5-layer application model. The most important characteristic is ease of use. So how quickly can we enable a spectrum of people, a spectrum of citizen developers to start to build solutions that can be used in anger at a departmental level. And the third use case is slightly different again. This is really about creating applications that extend existing processes. So what we find in reality is that many of these are about creating new mobile apps that hand off to existing automated processes in some way. So they're either about enabling new groups of staff to participate in automated workflows in new ways, or they're about just creating an alternative channel for interaction. So key here is that you tend to have blended teams, right? Because you have a team that's responsible for the core process that is probably at least in part automated already, and you have a team that's responsible for the new extension or extensions. And you need these people to be able to work together effectively. And again, you need them to be able to work well in front of user teams and stakeholders. So to support this use case effectively, we need to really add in integration capabilities. Those things are likely getting on for as important as capabilities that help you to develop fast and deliver fast. So 3 subtly different use cases, and they need different things from tools. Here's the wrinkle, though. All of these things are actually connected. These use cases do not exist by themselves. And very quickly, I'll just explain that. So looking at the red arrow here I've called hardening. Application prototypes, when they lead to successful propositions, you need to kind of harden them or industrialize them so that they can become part of your business as usual operating environment. So you move from prototyping and you have to then take that into core operations, right? Looking at the integration arrow, if departmental application development exercises are going to deliver sustainable business improvements, then you'll need to actually integrate those. Even if they were initially built standalone, you're going to need to integrate them with other things at some point, and that point may come quite quickly. And third, looking at the bottom arrow there, engagement. When you're extending core operations to address new opportunities, it will often make sense for you to use modern digital innovation practices that promote rapid iterative prototyping and user feedback. So really, yes, these 3 use cases are different, but they are all connected. And over the life of a transformation initiative, you'll need to move between those. And that's really, really important. So when you think about how to select and use technologies, bear that in mind. I'm going to leave you with one more chart where I'm not going to go through this in super deep detail, but I just want to call out some of the key capabilities that kind of fall out of that analysis. So if you were only looking at prototyping, you'd really care about the lightest green of these blocks. So, you know, the ability to do rapid prototyping, really, really easy to use tools. And that's great as far as it goes. But then if you also want to serve the departmental use case, you're likely going to need a mobile app framework. And you're definitely going to need some features that really promote effective team working and scalable team working, and tied in with that, of course, change management facilities in the platform so that you can drive change with confidence. And then if you also want to address the third use case, it's around extension of core processes, you need to go a level further, right? You need integration, you need open APIs, you need to be able to scale, you need to have effective security that's open and can integrate with existing mechanisms. You really need ideally support for automated testing, and you get into a whole other set of capabilities that land on the table. So as you think about the kind of low-code platform you need, if you're really looking at this in a true digital transformation context, you need to think beyond just this idea of how do we move quickly, how do we get things done quickly. All right. Well, I hope that's been useful to you. I'm going to hand over to Bill now. Bill?
Thanks, Neil. Appreciate it. As mentioned, my name is Bill Raczyk, Director of Process Innovation with the OCC. We're headquartered in Chicago, so it's a little bit after 12:30. If there's a noise from my stomach, it's that I'm getting close to lunchtime, and but I promise not to rush through this talk. But today I want to share with you a little bit about how we've leveraged Appian's low-code platform to help us transform our processes here at OCC. All right, so most people may not be aware of who we are, so I want to give you a little context. OCC is the world's largest equity derivatives clearing organization. We support about 14 options exchanges, 4 futures exchanges, 115 members. We maintain a little over $100 billion in assets day in and day out. Within our regulatory terminology, we're what's known as a SIFMU, which is a systemically important financial market utility. What that means to us is that we're under pretty heavy regulatory scrutiny. Our core business is really centralized in providing risk management to the markets we serve through trade clearing and settlement, and we also act as a guarantor in the marketplace. And we also operate a stock loan market. Kind of to wrap up all that, our motto is that we are a foundation for secure markets. Hopefully it gives you a little bit of a background of what I'm about to share with you. So moving on to the next, we've got the challenges that we faced. So while we deliver our services quite effectively each day, we do face a multitude of challenges. We must adhere to a very rigorous set of regulatory expectations. We need to deliver our services each and every day to ensure a secure, functioning marketplace, and also providing timely and accurate processing of our data. So as our markets are ever changing and our regulatory environments are ever changing, we need to become a lot more agile and at the same time maintain sound practices. So we really wanted to become a little more process and risk focused. We need to continue to provide daily excellence while initiating an organization-wide effort to become more efficient and increasingly mitigate risks that we faced. And particularly those risks stem from manual tasks within our processes. So you all have them, those processes that you might be a little bit embarrassed to admit, the process that you ask kind of out loud, why do we still do it this way? Well, we set out to address a few of those types of issues. We took really good notes. We put some tangible improvements in place right from the start. And as we were all too aware that nothing is ever perfect from the start, so we really endeavored to improve our processes and our practices with every step, with every effort, with every sprint. And we learned a great deal from those efforts. And we adopted a very agile development process as well as an agile management process so that we could learn and continue to improve with every effort. So we took a look at our challenges and particularly how we're going to use the low-code platform that we had in Appian through the lens that Harvard professor Clayton Christensen really popularized, and that's the concept of jobs to be done. So it's a really helpful mindset to look at any product or service. And so a good example is your phone. So your phone is a tool to be productive away from the office or sometimes even in the office for those of you in the work world. But that phone serves a very different job for your teenager. And that's going to be about connecting with friends, watching Netflix, and in generally ignoring the world around them. So we looked at Appian in the terms of jobs to be done in order to really ensure that each stakeholder was being delivered value. And this is what we came up with. This little chart here that highlights the jobs to be done. We looked at automation through our stakeholders' eyes. So for our senior management, they needed more transparency from our processes, in addition to added efficiency and risk mitigation. Our control groups, which include internal audit, compliance, enterprise risk, they needed to have more reliable and easy accessible documentation. Now, the individual department heads needed better control of their areas through enforced control adherence and also the approvals of those key controls that they could be quicker and easier and better documented. Now, my team in process innovation, we really endeavored to deliver value while improving each area's risk profile throughout the organization. Now, my partner team on the IT side, which is known as Enterprise Technology Solutions, they needed something that was going to deliver solutions quicker, make use of Agile, and also build modules that could be reusable. So a lot of those are items that Neil referenced earlier. And we've been able to leverage Appian's low-code platform to get each of these jobs done. So for every project, we focus on delivering key outcomes. The application must first mitigate a known risk, but also deliver an easy method to demonstrate control adherence. So management must be able to be aware of the status of processes that they're accountable for, while also presenting useful data through records and reports. Finally, each application must support the policies and procedures of the department. In each application we built, the teams needed to update their procedures just to keep up with the level of transformation and risk reduction that was becoming apparent with each application. So in this graphic, which kind of refer to as our automation solar system, we depict the various applications we've developed since around mid-2015, and we're still building. We're, in fact, working in 2 efforts right now that can deliver a total of 3 applications. That's the work that we're currently undertaking. But on this chart, what we show is the applications around onboarding and business expansion and even new products applications. They're supporting our organization's growth. The regulatory filing and regulatory request applications, they help us manage our relationships with our regulators. And the remaining applications help us manage day-to-day operations. So as you can see, we've covered a lot of ground in a fairly short amount of time, and we wouldn't have been able to do that without using a low-code platform like Appian. There are a few things we learned along the way, and I want to share a few of those things with you as well. And the first one is around data, records really. And so we've optimized our practice to focus first on records. So this allows us to ensure that a common taxonomy is established, and the data identified captures all the critical information for the teams to get their jobs done. Additionally, this enables us to avoid rework. As key users, they can ensure that all the data they need is identified up front and won't come in piecemeal later on. This approach also enables us to look at reporting from the very beginning and not as an afterthought. So we also work with our audit teams to make sure the data we're capturing will meet their needs at the end when we finally deliver the application, so that when that team gets audited, the audit group will be able to find everything that they need very easily, very simply. We've had a few recent successes on that part, and the business units really appreciate that kind of focus. So this records first approach has been very beneficial to each of our efforts. Next, we start going into the benefits that are gained by focusing on risk. So we found that through focusing on risk, that there's some side benefits that we really didn't anticipate, but they're very beneficial. With documentation being in a single location, the time to respond to an audit or an exam is greatly reduced. Oftentimes, we have to turn around requests in 24 hours. So being able to jump to one place reliably and be able to pull that data is unbelievably handy. And by walking through each process, we can identify those efficiencies as we're going through the automation phases. And it helps focus the team to determine why steps are even being done and the history of those. And, oftentimes we run into processes, and I'm sure many of you have as well, where you start asking, well, why do we even do this? I don't remember why we did this, or even it's just the way it's always been. So we can start uncovering those and start applying some solutions, some automation solutions, and leveraging the tool to get those done. And there's even times where measuring improvements from an application, just from a risk perspective, can sometimes be a little cloudy. So when we're seeing real process efficiencies put in place as well, that success story for the application just grows stronger. So next, I'm going to touch on throwaway. So while we do focus on data first, there's times where we build screens that we know are only going to be temporary and that they're going to be replaced by workflow steps that are going to follow the governed flow. But this approach allows us to ensure that the data being captured is complete and can be maintained while the other elements of the system are being developed. So by having an agreed upon naming convention within the data repository allows us to do screen development that much quicker. There's a lot less arguing and pushback on screen field names because they're already set in stone and they've been agreed upon and thought through. So the user story development is a lot easier too because the data, everyone's familiar with it, everyone knows what we're calling terms, and there's just a lot more agreement from the get-go. Now, another part of this picture is measurement. And so we try to get measurable results out of every effort. We start from the very beginning with the existing process measurements if we have them, and then blend in the goals for the new application, as well as any assumptions. And we stop frequently after sprints to ensure that we're still adhering to our original goals and that the process metrics begin to show the improvement that we intend. So we do allow a little bit of time after we put an application in place to allow the department to get used to using the application, to get to play with it, to understand how it's going to work day in and day out. And so we kind of hold back on measurement during that time. But once they're comfortable, we revisit the measurement effort so that we can see the improvement from before the automation effort even took place. And we also make sure that we're consistently delivering on the metrics that we had set out to improve. And so far, we've had a pretty successful history. Thus far in the applications we've rolled out, we are converting manual controls on an average of a little bit over 70% in the processes that we've addressed. So kind of in summary, a few takeaways. By using Appian's low-code platform, we've been able to refine our automation practice based on the following key concepts to look both up and down the value chain to identify features that are key to each stakeholder group. Next, we focus on data first. Helps reduce some of the rework and thrashing, if you will. And lastly, we measure and a number of times along the way, and we're also prepared to change course if for some reason we're seeing that we're getting off track. So I hope that some of this information has been useful. I've enjoyed sharing with you. And I'm going to throw it back to Kevin, who may have some questions and answers and so forth.
All right, thanks, Bill. I'm going to talk a little bit about Appian, and then we'll go into the Q&A session at the end. So we talked a little bit about how low-code addresses the challenges of agility and developer shortages and resource constraints and some of the process issues that arise around building applications and deploying them. Low-code by itself, though, isn't always enough, and it's important to consider a low-code platform that has really the power to produce enterprise-grade software. That means applications that are, beyond departmental, that can solve big problems, that can support mission-critical business operations. And when you peel back the onion, that kind of means that you need applications that support very sophisticated data and process management together. And the only thing that's going to give you the ability to develop applications that cover this, or really that's what's going to give you the ability to develop a wide variety of applications with a full range of use cases that run in a variety of different industries and different enterprise IT environments. And then, of course, on top of that, it's almost a given that you need enterprise-grade security and scalability and availability and reliability. So you bring these things together, the sophisticated data, the process management, the low-code speed, as well as those enterprise-grade characteristics. And basically what you have is a platform for digital transformation. So you can get to market faster, you can be more responsive to change, you can drive more innovation in your business models and your business processes. And that's really what we're striking for at Appian. It's probably worth mentioning that we're the only platform out there that's been rated as a leader in both low-code application development and business process management. So with Appian, you're going to get that blend, that mix of speed and power together. The speed and agility of low-code and the power, the data management and process management capabilities of a BPMS. So, and then of course as well, we're running on the industry's most reliable, scalable, available, and secure cloud service. So that's kind of what Appian is all about. I wanted to talk quickly about some of the use cases that we typically support. On this slide here, the boxes represent in probably the most simplest way your environment of enterprise applications. When you boil it down, Appian basically does three things. The first thing is building meaningful, significant new applications fast. That's pretty straightforward. If there's a need for a major new business application and packaged alternatives aren't the right direction, you can certainly build the app using Appian directly, and you can do it much faster, up to 20 times faster, according to some analysis that we've done, because you're maximizing developer productivity with low code, you're leveraging the citizen developer in the process, and incorporating the business directly into the actual development cycle, which improves, of course, business and IT collaboration. The second thing you can do with Appian is basically fill white space. Extend existing systems with new processes. So these are Appian apps that can bolt onto existing enterprise applications to handle a related process that your core system doesn't currently support. So for example, you may have a special exception process for claims management. You could also have less mission-critical applications that are useful but might not get built on their own because they fall too low on the priority list. This is where Appian can kind of help to fill in that white space. It's probably worth pointing out that no matter how you use Appian, it's always effectively kind of a layer of future-proofing for the applications you build. So anything you build in Appian instantly is mobile, and it's available as a native application on iOS and Android. There's no incremental work that you need to do to actually deliver that native mobile application. And Appian also makes it really easy to plug in transformative new technologies, whether it's IoT or predictive analytics, AI, RPA, whatever it is. Appian is effectively a delivery vehicle to insert these capabilities into your operational processes. And to make it even easier with some of that, we offer an integrated AI designer, so you can leverage machine learning directly in the applications as you build, in your applications as you build them. And just last week, we also announced a new product, Appian RPA with Blue Prism, which integrates Blue Prism's industry-leading RPA, robotic process automation solution, directly into the Appian platform. And we're excited to add that as an extension of our capabilities. The third use case here is basically orchestrating between applications, connecting and unifying existing applications. Here, Appian operates as a layer that basically is capable of abstracting away the complexity, the old user interface, the old user experience of existing applications, which may be legacy applications, and basically creating a more seamless and productive work environment for users. So you're breaking down silos here without the cost and complexity and delay and pain of rip and replace traditional system consolidation. You're effectively appifying the user experience, and you're enabling those cross-system processes. So, as a result, we're kind of solving a variety of different problems, a wide array of different use cases for our customers. We categorize these into three broad categories. The first is improving the customer journey, so enabling our customers to deliver a better customer experience in sales, marketing, and support. Clearly highly aligned with digital transformation initiatives as you traditionally think about them. But as we saw from the poll result earlier today, digital transformation isn't all about the customer journey and the customer experience. It's also about improving business operations and operational efficiency, maximizing employee productivity, making better decisions. And this is really a fundamental aspect of digital transformation because if you're not on a path to improve the agility and the efficiency of business operations, it's really difficult to maintain a superior customer experience over time, even if you put a lot of work into the front end of how you're delivering your business. The back end has to be flexible to support the front end as business conditions change and market demand changes. So business operations is another major category for us. And I also add governance, risk, and compliance here as well, because it's a big segment, typically very complex. And as I mentioned earlier, Appian is pretty unique when it comes to handling complex data and processes together. So whether we're talking about applications like pharmacovigilance or anti-money laundering or any other compliance application, Appian can be a real accelerator. So just a few examples here quickly. Enterprise, this is their own words, an end-to-end operating system for their rideshare business. Appian built an app to support this brand new business model for them. Took it live in 8 weeks. DFW Airport, they're building a digital airport of the future. And we've built 36 applications with them, delivered in 18 months. So you're seeing this mix of enterprise-grade power, complex applications, together with that speed of low-code application development and delivery. Bendigo and Adelaide Bank, another example. Their goal really is has been to compete on great customer service. That's their #1 mission. And they used Appian to transform how they engage customers. They built a whole array of applications, 26 applications ranging from ATM management to credit card management, mortgage origination, merchant services, a whole lot more in 18 months, really revolutionizing that entire customer experience. So just to kind of wrap things up, low-code can be an enabler of rapid digital transformation, but in and of itself, it's not enough. You also need that enterprise-grade power to build significant game-changing applications that have that transformative power. So with that, let's kind of move on to the Q&A section. We have a poll question we're going to kick off as we move into Q&A. So which of these low-code platform use cases is most important to you? Application prototyping, departmental application development, extending existing processes, or all together? And we'll give that kind of a minute or two to run. I'll leave it up here on the screen. And in the meantime, we've had some other questions come in. So why don't I kick off one of those other questions, and I'll pass this one on to Neil, actually. Neil, how do you see the low-code market and the products in the low-code market evolving over the next 3 to 5 years?
Okay, great question. Wow. So these days it's hard to have an opinion for anything that's kind of more than a couple of years out. So not sure about 5 years. I might be a robot in 5 years, I guess. But really, I think what we're going to see is more and more tools generally applying these same principles. So, and we're seeing it not just in the kind of the core app dev space or even the business process space. We're seeing it in the integration space. We're seeing it in all kinds of adjacent spaces where there's a drive to deliver tools that are accessible and usable by broader populations of people. So that's absolutely a trend. This kind of low-code trend is kind of pushing out across a whole swathe of different kind of technology areas. So that's one thing. The other thing that we're absolutely going to see, I think, which is part of that, is more features and capabilities in those tools that are actually kind of in quotes intelligent or AI assisted, if you want to kind of use that term. So where tools will actually kind of configure themselves and suggest things based on historical understanding of what other people have done in certain situations, right? So if you're old enough to remember the often hated Microsoft Clippy, that little kind of clip guy who used to pop up and say, it looks like you're writing a letter. Well, if you imagine that, but actually useful in the context of building applications, building out integration scenarios and so on, we're going to see more and more of that. Driven by AI, yes, but also driven by cloud platforms, which can aggregate metadata across many, many different customer scenarios. So actually driving digital kind of innovation within the tools themselves.
Great. Thanks, Neil. Let's go with a question here for Bill. Bill, what are some of the considerations and initial steps you recommend when starting your first low-code project?
Oh, that's a great one. It's funny, I look back at our first one, and there's so much I would have done different. But probably one of the first considerations is getting the users and really the organization around the concept of envisioning what's possible and getting away from what has always been or small incremental steps. Start thinking a little bit bigger and then trying to address that bigger picture in smaller chunks. In fact, we moved to a 1-week sprint in order to kind of move along quicker and get that adoption at a quicker rate.
Okay, great. Let's shift it over and take a look at the poll results here. All right, so we see a consensus that low-code platform is important for a variety of different things. So most people have answered all of the above to the question, and a couple people focused more in on departmental application development and application prototyping. Extending existing processes seems to be the lowest answer here, but general consensus that low-code is being looked at for a variety of different things. Neil, do you want to add any thoughts to this or comments?
Well, only to say, Kevin, that if that's what you're looking at doing, that's a really, really important thing to have in your mind as you look to select a tool, because if you want to do these things, like as I presented, those use cases are all connected. So you need to think about the kind of superset of capabilities you need to serve each of those use cases. So yeah, that's the only comment, but very, very interesting. Thanks a lot.
Okay. All right. Another question here for Bill. It seems that in most projects you have many stakeholders who have over time realized benefits that you've delivered via low code. What impediments to acceptance of a low-code platform did you find when you first introduced it at the OCC?
So kind of very similar to my last answer, the tough part was getting users to envision the future and in making use of low-code. By cutting back to the 1-week sprint, that helped a great deal. Other impediments, though, really came in from getting a really good idea of the kind of reporting and data they wanted out at the end of a workflow. So that's why we shifted towards that record first concept. What we were finding is there were a lot of at the end of a process, we had a lot of people asking, "Can I have a report that does this or shows me that?" And in the end, there were a couple of things, elements of data that we didn't capture. So we shifted back, and so it's really kind of I think the word is somewhat overused, but the journey of a project. The users have to be brought along and kind of shown the path as opposed to letting them chart the way and getting away from projects as usual.
All right, Neil, I think I got another one here for you. I may take a crack at this one myself, but here we go. How is this a revolution exactly? Low-code generation and BPM have been around for decades.
That's a great one. And I have a get out here that actually, if we were to go back and look at the beginning, the title of the webinar that I kind of originally put forward for this, it's kind of the R is in brackets, I think. So, and there's kind of a bit jokey, but the whole point is that actually what we see is a lot of companies who are new to this whole game, who haven't really been through the BPM technology wave in any serious way, do look at this as being revolutionary. But actually, many organizations that have really embraced the possibilities of platforms like Appian is not the only platform, it's important for me to say that, but anyone who's really embraced those possibilities would see this really as evolutionary. It is actually It's about making the tools easier to consume. It's about making it easier to start quickly, easier to get to a result quickly. And so it's really kind of incremental improvements and kind of really kind of slightly different ways of packaging the technology, looking at jobs to be done in a slightly different way to enable us to start small, to scale faster, and so on. So for some people, it does feel like a revolution. But for many people who've already lived with this technology and its capabilities for a while, it really is more of an evolution.
Yeah, great answer, and I think I completely agree with that. I would just maybe add that a couple things. I think in parallel to the evolution of the technology itself, which obviously has continued to improve over the last 10 years or so, to the point where low code is gradually approaching the point of almost no code. Where really the business can be directly building applications themselves. We've also seen the process for application development changing too. So we've moved from approaches in the past which were more waterfall oriented to much more agile approaches today, where effectively business and IT are working side by side on an intraday basis, building applications, iterating them in real time, and that's a pretty significant paradigm shift. And that tends to have driven, results which I think 10 years ago would have been, even today they're pretty remarkable in terms of the speed that you can actually build and deploy a sophisticated application in. And I showed a couple of examples in my presentation. So, it is a revolution and an evolution, I guess, depending on your perspective. To agree with Neil there. All right, I guess one more question here. Let's see here. Find the question. A long list of answered questions here. All right, maybe I'll target this one at Bill. Does effective use of Appian assume a maturity level for target customers with regards to data management, business process modeling, et cetera? So as the customer, as the user, Bill, maybe getting your perspective on this could be pretty interesting.
Yeah, so typically we haven't seen a lot of maturity in those kinds of realms. We spend a lot of time educating and teaching and particularly showing the users on the power of not only the tool but of employing efficiencies and so on and so forth, so that we bring them along. And we acknowledge that we're probably going to have to come back and make some improvements later on because they're still kind of in the education phase. But we're not going to wait and try to educate everyone first. So we've been taking pockets and bring them along with us. So it's I'm not sure if that's always the best route, but it seems to be working pretty well for us.
Great. Well, I think we're actually a little bit over time for the webinar, so I think we're going to bring things to a close. I'd like to thank everybody for sticking with us through the webinar. I hope it was useful for everybody. And thank you again to Bill and Neil for joining us today as guest speakers. Really appreciate it. And with that, thanks again, and have a great day.